Depression with anxiety and how they work together, and what you can do to crush both of them. So back in 2016, back when I was at Clemson University, I remember I was going through a tough time during my life. And it was actually so tough that I actually went to see a therapist. And this was my first time ever seeing a therapist despite being in a counseling master's program. And one thing that I was struggling with, or the big thing that I was struggling with, was my anxiety. With my anxiety, I had a lot of fear about getting sick. I had fear about getting cancer, fear about having some type of STD. I had a fear about a lot of things, really, and it was all health related. And it got so bad that I started to physically feel aches and pains within my body. I started to get these sweats. I started to really have all these headaches and migraines, things that you would naturally associate with an illness, right? And that's not to say that anxiety isn't an illness, but you associate this with something like a virus, if you will. So just like you, I would go into Wikipedia, not Wikipedia, but I would go into Google WebMD, and I would type in, what does it mean if you have this symptom, and this symptom? And it'll say, it means that you have this deadly disease that's only found in 1% of people. It would say something like that. And I would think, oh my gosh, am I going to die? There's so much things that I want to do within my life, and I can't just die at 25, 26, right? It was really, really tough for me. And it got so bad again that not only did I go to counseling during that time, but I started to do bad in my classes. And when you're in a master's program, you can only afford to get, I believe, 2 C's, if you will. If you get 2 C's, then you're out the program. And I got my first C during that time. So I started to really panic. I was like, yo, I gotta get this under control. And with anybody with illness, anxiety disorder, you know what it's like to go to the ER at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? And you've probably been there several times, right? That's what I was doing. Almost every week, once a week, I was going to the ERs and I was telling them, hey, I have all these things going on with me. And what they would do is they'd run a battery of tests, and they'll come back and say, you're fine. All your tests came back normal. And I'll be like, no, that can't be. Like, I have these headaches. I have these pains in my arms. I have this rash on my arm, right? Like, I would have all these things to say, and they will say, yeah, but that stuff happens to anybody. It could just be, allergies, or maybe you did catch something, but it's not what you think that it is, right? It's not as bad as you think it is. And then one of them said, hey, have you ever thought about going to therapy? And I was like, no. Like, it was the furthest thing from my mind, despite being in a counseling program. So I started to look it up, and I saw that at Clemson University, just like many universities, they have free counseling programs for the students. It's actually baked into your tuition. So I was like, you know what? Let me go. And from going to that therapy session, right? And I went several times, but from going to therapy during that time of my life, I actually realized that my mind has this ability to catastrophize. So now I can actually step outside of that catastrophizing way of thinking and see that, oh, that is just my mind doing that thing that it normally does when everything isn't perfect. Can you relate? Right? So from that, it actually gave me the tools to handle something like the pandemic. Because when that came, I started to have some of the same type of worries, some of the same type of anxieties. I started to think, oh man, can I breathe? Can I smell things? Well, when you're anxious, you're going to have shorter breath, right? Like, it's going to be hard to breathe. So it's just started to get my mind going again. But again, I remember that my mind has this ability. It has this trick that it always tries to pull on me, right? It's kind of like going to a magician show. It has this trick. It has this illusion. And if I'm not careful, I will fall for it again. But that's why therapy is so important, because it gives you that self-awareness. Now, my anxiety started to lead into depression because I was so stuck into the future that I wasn't doing anything in the present. And when I wasn't doing anything in the present, I would then look back or look up and see, man, I have a C in this class, or I'm way behind in my courses, or I'm just not simply having fun. Because I can vividly remember sitting at a bar down in downtown Clemson University, or downtown Clemson, right? Clemson is the name of the city. And I remember being out with my friends, and football is everything at Clemson. And there's a great game going on. I had wings in front of me. I had drinks. I had fries. I had my friends. But I wasn't happy. I was sitting there just lost in my thoughts, thinking about this test that I didn't do, or thinking about this virus, this disease, or this whatever that I thought that I had. And all of this was taking me out of life. And as a result, I started to get depressed because I wasn't enjoying the things that were right in front of me. The example that I love giving when it comes to being in a psychological fog, being caught up in your mind, right? Not being present. I love giving an example of it being like when you go to the dentist and you get your teeth cleaned from the dentist, right? Or really you get a filling or some type of procedure done and they have to numb your tongue. And when they numb your tongue, you then leave and you still have that numbness within your tongue, but you decide to go out and get something to eat. You decide to get a drink. You decide to eat some candy or whatever it is, and you can't enjoy it. Why? Because your tongue isn't all the way there. And it's the same thing for us, but mentally as well. So it is very important for us to be present in order to enjoy these things. So this is how depression, or rather anxiety, can lead into depression. It's because you're so caught up in the future that you're not doing anything right here in the current present right now. And because you aren't doing anything now, you don't have anything fulfilling to add to your life. So now that the depression here, what happens is then you don't do anything. You're so sucked out of life that you're drained, you're tired, you don't feel motivated, right? And then you have all these negative thoughts just swirling in your head. And what that starts to do, if you're not careful, is you start to ruminate. And ruminate is the same thing as worry or overthinking. It's when you're so caught up in the clouds that you can't feel your feet here on the ground. And when that happens, you start to look down on yourself. You start to beat yourself up. You start to feel like, man, you know what? Life just isn't worth living. And that's when people start to feel anxious. They start to think about having suicidal thoughts. And I'll even go a little bit further too, if you don't mind. When people start to have these self-deprecating thoughts, they start to think that things in life don't mean anything, or even when opportunities come their way, they will talk themselves out of those opportunities because they think that they're not good enough. And again, when these opportunities come up, when they think they're not good enough, guess what they don't do? They don't take advantage of the opportunities. Just like I wasn't taking advantage of the courses in front of me, taking advantage of the game that was in front of me, right? The food that was in front of me, the friends that were in front of me, like just like I wasn't taking advantage of that. It's the same thing, guys. It's the same thing. And people that are depressed, one thing that they do a lot of is that they self-sabotage because they believe that they should be depressed. And because that they're depressed, there's no getting out. They feel like it's hopeless. And when you feel like everything is hopeless, you start to feel like life is slipping by. You look up, 5 years went by, 10 years went by. You look up, you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever it is. And it's not to say that there's something bad with those ages, but it's saying that you feel as though you've been procrastinating all your life. And now you feel like the goals that you set, the new changes that you wanted for your life, right? So it could have been a new career, getting back in love, right? Starting something like a passion project, if you will. You feel like these things are beyond you. You feel like you've missed opportunities and everybody has taken advantage of them. And that leaves you more depressed, more anxious, right? So this is how these two things work together. So now that I'm telling you how anxiety can lead to depression, right? And again, this happens because you're so caught up in the future that you're not doing anything in the present. And because you're not doing anything in the present, you get upset that life isn't going the way that you want it to go. Depression can lead into anxiety because right now you're just not doing anything and you're ruminating about all the things that you should have done. And now you feel like there's this mountain load of stress, this mountain load of tasks that you should have done. But again, it's because you're too depressed. You're too unmotivated. You're too sad. You're too lethargic, right? Which means tired, that you don't take any action. So what happens to that list of tasks? It just builds and builds and builds. And that starts to bring overwhelming anxiety. So this is how these two things work together, right? It's almost like a cycle if you're not careful. So how do you break the cycle? Well, let me tell you. So I'm going to do this in a metaphor. And I heard this from someone at a panel that I was sitting with, and it made great sense. So they said, imagine that you're living in a neighborhood, right? And there's to the left, you have depression, right? Depression is living down the street. And to the right, you have anxiety living up the street, right? And what happens is we leave and start to go up the street, right? So go up the street in our mind. That's when we meet anxiety, right? We're so stuck into the future. That's where anxiety lives, where we're just constantly thinking, what if, right? So we come back home and we decide, you know what, let's go the other way. And then when we go the other way, we meet depression, right? And depression is in the past. This is when we ruminate about things that have happened to us, right? This may be about a failed opportunity that you missed. It may be a loved one that has passed, right? A breakup that you went through. It can be so many things, right? And this keeps you stuck, again, in the past. It keeps you stuck in this depressive state. So you come back. Now, the question now is what am I coming back to? Well, I know I said that you're coming back to home, but more specifically, you're coming back to the present, because where you live right now, right in this moment, that's where all the opportunities lie. If you stay in this moment, it gives you the ability to influence your future, and eventually your future will become the past that you can look back on, and you can look back on that past and remind yourself of who you are and what capabilities you have within yourself. So again, the key to stopping both of these things is being able to be present and do the things that you know you should be doing. So that is the key to being able to handle depression when it comes to anxiety, or anxiety when it comes to depression. It is a very simple task, and all you have to do is focus on where your feet are. Nick Saban and Oprah Winfrey, they were both asked, what does being present mean? And they mean being where your feet are. So with that being said, thank you for checking out this podcast. This is Coach Wells, and if you haven't commented to leave me a message, please do that so I can give you personal messages that's going to help you with whatever you're going through. And also, as a promise, I will do a podcast specifically for what you're going through. Just let me know in the comments what you'd love for me to talk about. It could be something that you're going through. It could be something that one of your friends or somebody that you love is going through. And I would do a podcast for you guys, and you can share it with them. All right, guys, take care. This is Coach Wells. I'm a licensed therapist, and booyah.